We live in a world where everyone is trying to be more disciplined, yet almost everyone is failing. People download productivity apps, create perfect morning routines, and write endless to-do lists, only to give up a few days later. Have you ever wondered why that happens? Why do our most ambitious plans collapse so quickly? It's not because we're weak, and it's not because discipline is impossible. It's because most of us are fighting the wrong battle. Miyamoto Musashi, the undefeated samurai and philosopher, understood this centuries ago. He didn't just fight with swords, he fought with life itself. After more than 60 duels without a single defeat, he wrote The Book of Five Rings, a guide that was never just about combat, but about how to live with unshakable discipline. Musashi discovered that the greatest war is not against an enemy out there, but against the chaos inside your own mind. And if you can master that battle, you can master anything. The truth is, discipline isn't a trick. It isn't motivation, and it certainly isn't a short-term fix. It's a way of life, a transformation so deep that people around you will call you crazy. But what they see as madness is simply clarity. The clarity to focus on what matters, to adapt when life resists you, to use your emotions as fuel, and to never let comfort seduce you into weakness again. In this episode, we're going to explore 12 lessons drawn from Musashi's philosophy, lessons that take you beyond the illusions of motivation and into the reality of discipline. They'll challenge you, they'll strip away excuses, and if you truly apply them, they'll change the way you live. The question is not whether these principles will work. Musashi proved them in the fires of battle. The question is whether you're willing to face yourself with the same honesty he demanded of his students. So let's begin with the first lesson, the foundation of it all, facing the harsh truth. Because before you can build discipline, you have to stop lying to yourself. 1. Face the harsh truth. Brutal self-assessment. If there is one thing Musashi demanded above all else, it was honesty. Not the comfortable kind of honesty that you share with others when it makes you look good. I mean the brutal kind, the honesty that cuts through your illusions and exposes the parts of yourself you've been hiding from. Musashi called this the earth ring, the foundation, because before you can build anything solid, you need to know exactly what ground you're standing on. Think about how most people define productivity. They tell themselves they're busy, they're grinding, they're working hard. But if you tracked their time minute by minute, the truth would hit like a sword through armor. Hours wasted scrolling on a phone, endless multitasking that produces nothing, energy drained into distraction disguised as effort. Musashi would have called this weakness, not because people don't have potential, but because they refuse to face the reality of their own behavior. In his writings, Musashi spoke of knowing the smallest things and the biggest things. What he meant was that discipline requires two kinds of awareness, the microscopic view of your daily habits and the wide-angle view of the life they create. Most people have neither. They drift through their days telling themselves stories. I'm exhausted because I work so hard, when in reality, they're exhausted because they burn their attention on empty movements. They mistake motion for progress. They confuse busyness with achievement. And the most dangerous part is not the waste of time itself, but the self-deception that hides it. Let's make it practical. Imagine you tracked everything you did for 1 week. No excuses, no filters. How many hours would you actually spend on deep, focused work? How many would vanish into aimless scrolling, unnecessary conversations, or running from one tab to another? For most people, the truth is brutal. 2, maybe 3 hours of real productivity. The rest is noise. That gap between the story you tell yourself and the reality of your behavior. That's the battlefield Musashi forces you to see. But here's the power of facing the truth. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. The illusion breaks, and in that breaking, discipline becomes possible, because you stop trying to motivate yourself out of a lie. Motivation cannot fix delusion, only truth can. Musashi once wrote, "Accept everything exactly the way it is, not the way you wish it was. That acceptance is the sword you must pick up." So start where Musashi would have started. Track your time. Expose the lies you've been telling yourself. See clearly the gap between the life you imagine and the life you're living. It will hurt, but it will also free you. Because once the ground beneath you is real, you can finally begin to build something unshakable. And once you've faced that truth, the next question is obvious. What do you do with it? How do you start moving forward when reality feels heavier than you imagined? That is where Musashi's second lesson begins. Learning to start small and stay consistent. 2. Start small, stay consistent. From drops to rivers. When people finally face the truth about themselves, their first instinct is usually panic. They realize how much time they've wasted, how weak their discipline really is, and in that surge of emotion, they try to rebuild their lives overnight. They wake up at 4 in the morning, write a schedule with military precision, swear off all distractions, and push themselves to live like a machine. And by noon of the first day, it collapses. They burn out, quit, and return to the same cycle of self-deception. The problem isn't that they're weak. The problem is that they tried to leap across a canyon in a single bound, instead of building a bridge one plank at a time. Musashi understood this better than anyone. In his early duels, he didn't use the same weapon twice. Sometimes a sword, sometimes a spear, sometimes just a wooden stick. Why? Because he was learning that victory doesn't come from a rigid plan. It comes from adapting and building strength gradually, from meeting reality where it is. Discipline works the same way. You cannot jump from chaos to perfection in one day, but you can take one step today, and another tomorrow, and another the day after that. Drops become streams, streams become rivers, rivers carve through mountains. Think about it. If you can't do 100 push-ups, do 10. If you can't write for an hour, write for 5 minutes. If you can't meditate for 20 minutes, sit quietly for 2. At first, it feels pathetic, insignificant. But here's the secret. The brain rewires itself through repetition, not through drama. Every time you keep a small promise to yourself, you carve a new identity. Someone who doesn't quit. That identity is the seed of unshakable discipline. The mistake most people make is thinking discipline requires heroic effort. But the truth is, heroic efforts are rare and unsustainable. It's the small, steady acts that transform you. Imagine waking up 30 minutes earlier than usual instead of 3 hours. Imagine reading 1 page a day instead of forcing yourself through a book. These little victories stack quietly, and before long they form a wall of discipline stronger than any burst of motivation could ever build. Musashi wrote, "In strategy, make the enemy think you are far away when you are near." Applied to discipline, this means tricking your own resistance. Make the task think it's defeating you while you're secretly winning. Do a little more than expected. Go one step beyond what your lazy self predicts. If your mind expects you to quit after 10 minutes, stay for 11. That 1 extra minute is where the transformation happens. This is the paradox of discipline. It grows stronger not when you try to conquer everything, but when you conquer something small every day. drops to rivers, rivers to oceans. Slowly, quietly, your life reshapes itself. And once you start moving in this way, something powerful happens. You begin to realize that the challenge isn't about how much you can do, but how well you can adapt. And that brings us directly to Musashi's next lesson: learning to flow like water, and to let flexibility become your greatest strength. 3. Flow like water. Adaptation over rigidity. If the earth ring forces you to face the truth, and the first drops of discipline begin with small, steady steps, then the next test is this: how do you survive when reality pushes back? Because reality always pushes back. Plans, no matter how perfect, break. The world doesn't bend for your schedule. And this is where most people fail, not because they lack effort, but because they refuse to adapt. Musashi wrote, "Water adopts the shape of its receptacle." Many people misread this as a call for passivity, for simply going along with whatever happens. But that's not what he meant. For Musashi, water was not weak. It was the most relentless force in nature. It doesn't smash through a rock in one strike. It wears it down over years. It doesn't argue with obstacles. It bends around them until they're dissolved. That is discipline in its purest form. Not rigid, but fluid. Think of how most people approach change. They discover their weaknesses and then draw up a grand plan to fix everything. They'll say, "I'll wake up at 4, meditate for 30 minutes, do a 2-hour workout, eat only clean food, and work 8 hours with full focus." It looks powerful on paper, but by the second day, it's in ruins. Why? Because life is unpredictable. A late night, an emergency, a distraction, and suddenly the perfect system collapses. Rigid discipline shatters on first contact with reality. Flowing discipline is different. Instead of fighting reality with fantasy, you design for resilience. You don't demand perfection, you commit to persistence. Can't do a full workout today? Do 10 push-ups. Too exhausted to read for an hour? Read a single page? Stuck in chaos with no quiet space to meditate? Close your eyes and breathe for 30 seconds. What matters is not the scale of the action, but the refusal to let the chain break. Over time, this flexibility becomes a kind of invisible power. Others give up because their plan didn't fit the day. You keep going because your plan bends, and each small adjustment keeps the river flowing. That's why water triumphs over stone. It doesn't force, it persists. Musashi himself trained this way. In his early duels, he deliberately avoided using the same weapon twice. He knew that the moment he relied on one rigid method, he would become predictable, fragile, beatable. By changing, by adapting, he became untouchable. His opponents were stuck in their single strategy, while Musashi flowed like water around them. This lesson matters now more than ever. In a world of distractions, perfection is a myth. Adaptation is survival. True discipline is not about sticking to the plan no matter what. It's about refusing to stop moving forward, even if the steps are smaller than you hoped. When life blocks one path, water finds another. When you learn to do the same, your discipline becomes unstoppable. So remember this: don't try to smash the rock in a single blow. Flow around it, wear it down with persistence, because if you can do that, nothing can hold you back. And once you've learned to flow, there's another test waiting, the test of emotion. Because discipline is not only about strategy and flexibility, it's about what you do with the fire inside you, the anger, the envy, the frustration. That's where Musashi's next lesson begins, transforming emotions into fuel instead of chains. 4. Transform emotions into fuel. Anger and envy as energy. There's a moment in every journey of discipline where the greatest enemy isn't laziness or distraction or even exhaustion. It's emotion. You wake up one day and see someone doing twice what you can do. Someone younger, stronger, richer, faster. And suddenly your progress feels pathetic. The voice inside whispers, "What's the point? You'll never catch up." That voice has destroyed more potential than any obstacle in the world. Musashi knew this well. His father died when he was 7 years old. He could have drowned in anger, in grief, in the unfairness of it all. But instead of letting that emotion break him, he turned it into a weapon. Hours of training, day after day, fueled not by calm or comfort, but by rage, sharpened into purpose. Each swing of his sword was not an explosion of frustration, but a channeling of it into skill. He didn't deny his anger. He aimed it. This is where most of us fail. We feel envy at the success of others and let it corrode us. We feel anger at our own failures and turn it inward, punishing ourselves, feeding shame. The emotion itself isn't the problem. It's what we aim it at. Aim it at yourself, and you self-destruct. Aim it at your weakness, and you evolve. Think of anger as fire. Left uncontrolled, it burns everything, including you. But directed at the right target, it forges steel. Imagine finishing a workout and realizing you quit at 30 push-ups. That anger you feel in the pit of your stomach? Don't waste it by saying, "I'm pathetic." Instead, use it to say, "Tomorrow, the minimum is 35. Imagine catching yourself wasting hours on your phone. Don't drown in shame. Use the disgust as fuel to lock the phone in another room the next day. Each emotion becomes an instruction. Each frustration becomes fuel. Musashi warned against jealousy, not because it's morally wrong, but because it's strategically useless. Every moment you spend envying another person is energy stolen from your own growth. That energy could be spent sharpening your blade, strengthening your body, disciplining your mind. The fire is always there. You cannot get rid of it. But you can choose whether it consumes you or transforms you. Here's a simple practice to make this real. Each night, write down the things that frustrated you about yourself during the day. Not vague feelings, but specifics. I checked my phone during deep work. I ate garbage for lunch. I skipped my meditation. Then, for each one, turn it into a mission for tomorrow. Phone in another room. Lunch prepped the night before. 2 minutes of meditation minimum. This is not positive affirmation. This is productive rage. You are turning the fire inward, not to destroy yourself, but to burn away weakness. Within weeks, something changes. You stop fearing your emotions. You stop seeing anger and envy as flaws. You begin to recognize them as energy, raw, powerful, and waiting to be directed. That's when you realize discipline is not about suppressing emotion. It's about mastering it, harnessing it, riding its energy into growth. But even here lies a danger, because once the fire starts working, once you see results, another trap appears, the trap of pride. You begin to believe you've made it, that you're disciplined now, untouchable, finished with the struggle, and that illusion is just as deadly as anger itself. Which brings us to Musashi's next lesson, staying humble, staying a student, even in the midst of victory. 5. The inner battle. Compete only with yourself. At some point in your journey, you'll feel the temptation to measure your progress against others. You'll look at the person who runs faster, lifts heavier, earns more, or seems to live with effortless discipline, and you'll feel the sting of inadequacy. Comparison is natural, but if left unchecked, it becomes poison. It shifts your attention from growth to performance, from becoming better to looking better. And the moment your energy turns outward like that, you've already lost. Musashi warned about this trap without ever using modern words for it. He understood that the battlefield isn't just physical, it's psychological. He wrote about knowing your enemy, but he didn't mean the swordsman across from you. He meant the versions of yourself that you still need to overcome. If you spend your life competing with others, you'll always be trapped in their shadow. But if you compete only with yourself, you'll find endless battles to fight and endless victories to claim. Think about how this shows up today. You go to the gym and see someone pressing twice your weight. Instead of focusing on your progress, you feel small, weak, insignificant. You scroll through social media and see highlight reels of people with perfect lives. Instead of gratitude for your own growth, you spiral into jealousy. But here's the truth. Those comparisons don't help you lift a single pound more. They don't add 1 ounce of discipline to your life. All they do is steal energy from the only person you can actually control, yourself. The inner battle means setting your compass differently. Stop asking, "Am I better than them?" Start asking, "Am I better than yesterday?" Did you add 1 more push-up? Did you read 1 more page? Did you resist 1 more temptation? That's the true scoreboard. It's not flashy, it won't get applause, but it's the only measure that matters. Because when you fight yourself and win, you're building something no one can take away. Musashi himself lived this. After his most famous duel, the one where he defeated Sasaki Kojiro, he didn't celebrate. He disappeared into solitude, not to bask in victory, but to study why he almost lost. Imagine that. The world saw him as invincible, but he saw himself as unfinished. That's the essence of competing only with yourself. Others may see victory. You see room to grow. This mindset transforms discipline from a performance into a practice. The gym isn't a stage, it's a workshop. Your habits aren't for display, they're for transformation. And when you adopt this approach, something incredible happens. You stop being distracted by the noise of other people's lives. Their victories, their failures, their opinions. None of it touches you anymore. Your attention is rooted in one question: how do I fight and win against myself today? That's the inner battle. And if you commit to it, every day gives you a new chance to win, not against the world, but against the weaker version of you that wants to quit, to drift, to stay small. Beat him today, and you'll wake up stronger tomorrow. That's how Musashi lived, and that's how discipline becomes unstoppable. But discipline isn't only about mindset, it's also about balance. The balance between sharpening your mind and strengthening your body. And that brings us to Musashi's next lesson, training both the sword and the pen. 6. Train both sword and pen. Discipline of mind and body. One of Musashi's most famous lines is this: "The warrior's is the twofold way of pen and sword." What he meant was simple but profound. A warrior is not complete if he trains only the body and neglects the mind. And he is equally incomplete if he sharpens the intellect but allows the body to become weak. True strength is forged in the union of both. Think about how discipline is usually portrayed today. On one side, you see the obsession with physical performance, the endless workouts, the diets, the pursuit of the perfect body. On the other, you see the intellectual grind, people devouring books, podcasts, lectures, filling their minds with knowledge but neglecting their health. Both extremes miss the point. What good is a sharp sword if the hand holding it is trembling? What good is a powerful body if the mind directing it is scattered? Musashi's wisdom is that the two must rise together. In his life, This was more than theory. Between duels, he painted, practiced calligraphy, and wrote extensively. His art wasn't separate from his training. It was part of it. Every brushstroke was discipline. Every poem was clarity of thought. At the same time, he never allowed his sword to dull. Hours of daily practice, years of repetition, each strike as intentional as his writing. He was shaping a whole person, not a one-sided machine. This lesson applies directly to us. Discipline isn't just about forcing yourself into a gym, nor is it just about reading a stack of self-help books. It's about balance. If you want clarity of thought, train your body to endure discomfort. If you want resilience of body, train your mind to command it. The two feed each other. A weak body drags the mind into lethargy. An undisciplined mind sabotages the body's progress. Together, they make you unshakable. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you challenged both at once? Maybe you read every day, but your body feels heavy, slow, neglected. Or maybe you train hard, but your mind is noisy, unfocused, hungry for direction. What would happen if you gave equal weight to both? What would happen if your morning routine challenged your muscles and your evening routine sharpened your mind? Over time, this dual training builds a harmony that most people never experience. You stop thinking of discipline as a burden. It becomes a rhythm, a way of living. Musashi knew that a man who can fight with a sword but cannot think clearly is dangerous to himself. And a man who can think clearly but cannot defend his ground is vulnerable to the world. But a man who unites both, that man is unstoppable. That's the path he left behind for us to follow. So as you build your discipline, don't ask, "Am I training enough?" Ask instead, "Am I training fully?" Both sword and pen, both body and mind. Because together they make you more than disciplined. They make you complete. And once you begin to live this balance, another truth becomes clear. Discipline is not about rare, extraordinary effort. It's about what you do daily, in the ordinary moments that most people overlook. Which brings us to Musashi's next lesson. The way is in training. Daily rituals as identity. 7. The way is in training. Daily rituals as identity. If there's one truth Musashi returned to again and again, it was this: mastery is not an event, it's a process. People imagine greatness as a single victory, a breakthrough, a dramatic transformation. But Musashi knew that what looks like brilliance on the battlefield is really the accumulation of countless hours in the shadows, training when no one is watching. His life was proof. 60 undefeated duels were not won in the moment of combat. They were won in the daily rituals that shaped the man who stepped into the fight. He wrote, "The way is in training, not in thinking about training, not in planning, not in waiting for the right motivation, but in the act itself, repeated, relentless, until it becomes who you are." That's the secret most people miss. Discipline is not something you occasionally summon. It's not something you perform when you feel inspired. Discipline is identity, and identity is forged through repetition. Think of your own life. You don't brush your teeth because you feel motivated. You do it because it's part of who you are. You don't question whether to walk when your legs can. You just walk. Musashi wanted us to see discipline the same way. Your rituals, done daily, without negotiation, without drama, become your nature. That's why he painted every day, practiced calligraphy every day, trained every day, not because he needed to prove anything, but because that was the way. Now, here's the challenge. Most people try to build discipline as if it's a tool they can pick up when needed. But the truth is, it only works if it becomes a way of living. If you decide you'll meditate sometimes, write when you feel like it, or train when convenient, you'll fail. Because convenience is the enemy of discipline. The way is not found in occasional bursts. It's carved into you through daily practice. The beauty of this is that the scale of the practice doesn't matter as much as the consistency. Writing a single paragraph every day is infinitely more powerful than writing 20 pages once a month. Doing 10 push-ups daily will change you more than doing 100 once a week. Rituals compound. They hardwire your identity. And once your identity shifts, discipline stops being effort. It becomes expression. Musashi understood that the mind tries to trick you into negotiation. Do I feel like training today? Do I have the energy? Maybe I'll do double tomorrow. He eliminated that entirely. For him, the question was never if he would train. The only question was how. And that is the essence of daily discipline. You don't debate it. You don't bargain with it. You don't delay it. You do it because it's who you are. So ask yourself, what rituals define you right now? Are they rituals of strength or rituals of weakness? Do you wake and reach for your phone or reach for your purpose? Do you let the day dictate you, or do you step into it with intentional practice? These small choices, repeated daily, are chiseling your identity whether you realize it or not. The way is in training, and training is nothing more than showing up again and again until what was once effort becomes natural, until what was once difficult becomes as effortless as breathing. That is how Musashi lived. That is how discipline becomes identity. But here lies a hidden danger. When you practice long enough and achieve results, it's easy to believe you've arrived, that you've become disciplined enough, that you no longer need the rituals that built you. That illusion has destroyed more warriors than failure ever did. And that's why Musashi's next lesson is essential. Staying humble, staying a student, even after victory. 8. Stay humble, stay a student. Discipline doesn't only crumble in defeat, sometimes it crumbles in success. In fact, success is often the more dangerous enemy, because once you start winning, once you've built momentum, a small seductive voice whispers, "You've made it. You're disciplined now. You can ease up." And if you listen to that voice, you begin to decay from the inside. Musashi understood this trap intimately. By the time he was in his 50s, he had defeated every major sword school in Japan, more than 60 duels, undefeated. His reputation was legendary, yet when people asked him if he had reached the way, his response was shocking. He said, "I have not yet reached the way." Imagine that, after a lifetime of victories, he still called himself a student. Why? Because he knew the moment you believe you've mastered discipline is the moment you begin to lose it. This is where many modern strivers fall apart. They track their time, they build habits, they finally see results. Friends ask what changed, family notices their transformation, and slowly they start to believe the myth of their own progress. They stop doing the small things that made them strong. They cut corners, skip rituals, and tell themselves, "I don't need that anymore." Within weeks, they're back where they started, weaker for having tasted victory. Staying humble is not about pretending you're not skilled. It's about remembering that discipline is a moving target. The challenges at the beginning are not the same challenges you'll face once you've built momentum. At first, the enemy is starting. Later, the enemy is complacency. Advanced discipline demands the same vigilance as beginner's discipline, sometimes more. This is why Musashi didn't just study his own style. He studied every school of strategy he could find, not to mock them or to steal techniques, but to remind himself there were always other perspectives, other approaches, other ways to grow. He knew that arrogance narrows your vision, while humility expands it. By staying a student, he kept himself sharp, while others grew dull in the comfort of their own victories. So what does this mean for you? It means that no matter how far you've come, you must keep finding ways to challenge yourself. Read books that make you feel ignorant. Train with people who outclass you. Step into arenas where you're a beginner again. Seek out discomfort, not because you need to prove anything, but because it keeps you alive, awake, humble. Discipline is not about arriving, it's about remaining, and the only way to remain is to keep learning, to keep evolving, to keep calling yourself a student, no matter how much you've achieved. Success can be a crown, or it can be a coffin. Which it becomes depends entirely on whether you let it harden you with arrogance or sharpen you with humility. Musashi chose humility. That's why his legacy lives centuries later. If you want your discipline to endure, you must do the same. Always a student, always learning, always sharpening the blade. And once you embrace humility, another truth emerges, one that few are willing to accept. That sometimes the most powerful step in discipline is not in action, but in withdrawal. That silence and solitude are not escapes, but weapons. And that's where Musashi's next lesson comes alive. The warrior's retreat into silence. 9. Silence and solitude, the warrior's retreat. We often imagine discipline as constant movement, relentless effort, unbroken activity. But Musashi's life tells a different story. After his most famous duel, the one where he defeated Sasaki Kojiro in a battle that made him legendary, he didn't celebrate. He didn't bask in glory, didn't parade his victory. Instead, he vanished into a cave for nearly 2 years. Why? To retreat into silence, to study himself, to face the parts of his discipline that still needed sharpening. This is a lesson most people resist. We live in a culture of noise, where silence feels like weakness and solitude feels like failure. People fill every spare second with stimulation, music, messages, videos, endless chatter. They tell themselves it keeps them connected, but often it just keeps them distracted. Yet true discipline demands the opposite. It demands periods of withdrawal, time to step away from the world, to examine yourself without interference. Musashi knew that battle reveals only part of the truth. Reflection reveals the rest. Without silence, victory blinds you. Without solitude, you cannot see the hidden cracks in your armor. The cave was not his escape. It was his forge. The absence of noise was the presence of clarity. In your own life, this doesn't mean abandoning society for years. It means carving out spaces where silence can speak to you. It could be 20 minutes each morning without your phone. It could be a long walk in the evening with no headphones, no distractions, only your thoughts. It could be journaling late at night, confronting the emotions and failures you'd rather ignore. In silence, the lies you tell yourself dissolve, and the truth stands naked. It is uncomfortable, but it is also where transformation begins. There's a reason so many great thinkers, from philosophers to scientists to artists, sought solitude. It wasn't because they hated people. It was because solitude allows the mind to deepen, to connect with thoughts that cannot emerge in the constant noise of daily life. And for discipline, that silence is essential, because you cannot sharpen your sword if you never stop swinging it. You must pause, reflect, and refine. Ask yourself, When was the last time you truly sat alone, not as an escape, but as a practice? When was the last time you listened to the voice inside you without drowning it in distractions? If the answer is, I don't remember, then this is your signal. Make solitude part of your discipline, not an accident, but a ritual. Musashi's cave is a symbol, not of retreat from life, but of a higher commitment to it. He stepped away not to avoid the world, but to return stronger, clearer, sharper. That is the warrior's retreat, and it is just as necessary for us now as it was for him centuries ago. But silence alone is not enough. For discipline to last, it cannot depend on fleeting emotions or bursts of motivation. It must be built on something deeper, systems, habits, structures that carry you forward even when you don't feel like moving. That's the next lesson Musashi leaves us. Systems over motivation. 10. Systems over motivation. Build habits, not hopes. Motivation is intoxicating. It surges through you like fire, convincing you that you'll change everything today, that you'll conquer every weakness, that nothing can stop you. But like fire, it burns out, it flickers, fades, and leaves you cold. If your discipline depends on motivation, it will die the moment that fire dies. That's why Musashi didn't build his life on feelings. He built it on systems. Think about it. Did Musashi wake up each morning asking himself if he felt motivated to train for hours, to practice his cuts thousands of times, to face life and death duels? Of course not. He didn't give himself the luxury of choice. Training wasn't an option. It was a system, embedded into his day so deeply that it became part of who he was. The brush, the sword, the quiet meditation. These weren't bursts of inspiration. They were rituals. And this is where most of us fail. We rely on energy spikes. We wait until we feel inspired to work, until we feel ready to go to the gym, until we feel clear enough to write. We confuse emotion with discipline. But feelings are unreliable guides. Systems don't care about feelings. Systems carry you when you don't want to move. Systems drag you forward when motivation abandons you. Consider something simple like exercise. If you leave it up to motivation, you'll do it only when you're in the mood. But if you systemize it, if you commit to a specific time, a specific routine, a specific trigger, then even on days you're exhausted, you'll still show up. You may do less, you may go slower, but you'll stay in motion. And staying in motion is what builds unbreakable momentum. Musashi's wisdom here is timeless. He understood that willpower alone is fragile. It's like a rope that frays with every pull. Systems are stronger than willpower. They protect you from yourself. They eliminate negotiation. They turn effort into inevitability. When you rely on systems, you don't ask, "Do I feel like it?" You simply act, because the ritual demands it. The paradox is this: systems feel restrictive at first, but they are the deepest form of freedom. They free you from indecision, from procrastination, from the endless debate in your mind about whether to act or delay. Systems liberate your energy to focus on the act itself, not on the choice of whether to do it. Ask yourself, what parts of your discipline are still running on hope? Do you hope you'll find the energy to study, or do you have a system that guarantees it? Do you hope you'll resist distraction, or do you have a system that makes distraction impossible? Every time you leave discipline to chance, you hand your life over to weakness. Every time you build a system, you reclaim it. Musashi didn't need motivation to pick up the sword. It was simply what he did. That is the level of inevitability you must reach in your own life. Not, "I'll try," but "This is who I am." And once you build those systems, you discover something unsettling, that even with rituals, even with discipline, there is no finish line. The struggle doesn't end. It doesn't get easier. And that realization breaks many people. But Musashi teaches us the opposite truth, that the eternal struggle is not your enemy, but your path. 11. The eternal struggle, discipline without end. There comes a moment in every disciplined life when exhaustion whispers its most dangerous question: when does this get easier? You've been waking early, training daily, holding yourself accountable, and yet the effort never seems to fade. You think there will be a point where the struggle disappears, where habits run on autopilot and life becomes effortless. And when that moment never comes, many people quit. They believe discipline has failed them. But the truth is far sharper. Discipline never ends. Musashi knew this. After decades of training, after victories that no man in Japan could rival, he still declared, "I have not yet reached the way." Think about that. 60 duels undefeated, mastery of multiple weapons, years of relentless practice, and still he refused to call himself finished. Why? Because he had learned the deepest truth of all. The struggle is not temporary. The struggle is the way. Most people imagine discipline as a bridge. You suffer now, you train now, you sacrifice now, and eventually you cross over into ease. But that bridge does not exist. There is no other side. There is only the daily battle, repeated forever. And this isn't a curse. It's the very thing that makes you strong. Because if the struggle never ends, then every day becomes an opportunity. Every morning is a new fight. Every choice is a new chance to sharpen the blade. This is why so many fall apart when they believe they've made it. They think the battle is behind them, that their discipline will carry itself. But the truth is brutal. Discipline decays the moment you stop fighting for it. The eternal struggle is the price of greatness, but it's also the gift. Because once you accept it, the weight lifts. You stop asking when it will get easier. You stop resenting the effort. Instead, the effort becomes your identity. Imagine breathing. You don't wake up each day frustrated that you must breathe again. You simply do it, without thought, without resentment, because it is part of being alive. Discipline can become the same. When you accept that the struggle is eternal, it stops being struggle. It becomes nature. Training, reflection, sacrifice, consistency. They stop being battles you dread, and they become rhythms you live by. Musashi captured this beautifully in his writings about the void ring, the final stage of his philosophy. He wrote, "In the void is virtue and no evil. Wisdom has existence, principle has existence, the way has existence, spirit is nothingness." What he meant was that in the void, in the acceptance of struggle without end, you find peace. Discipline stops being a performance. It becomes the ground of your existence. So, stop searching for the finish line. Stop waiting for the day when habits become painless, when the work becomes easy, when the struggle disappears. That day will never come, and that's not a tragedy, it's liberation. Because the eternal battle means the eternal chance to grow. The only question is whether you'll show up for it. And when you finally accept this truth, when you stop fighting the endlessness of discipline and start embracing it, something extraordinary happens. Discipline stops being something you do. It becomes who you are. And that is Musashi's final and greatest lesson. 12. Identity shift, becoming discipline itself. At the beginning of this journey, discipline feels like a burden. You drag yourself into it. You wrestle with resistance. You argue with your own excuses. Every action feels heavy, like you're forcing yourself to become someone you're not. But Musashi's final gift to us is this: if you persist long enough, the weight transforms. Discipline stops being something outside of you, and it becomes something inside of you. It stops being effort, and it becomes identity. Musashi didn't paint every day to become a painter. He didn't practice calligraphy to become a writer. He didn't train endlessly to win one duel. He did these things because they were who he was. A warrior trains. A warrior writes. A warrior reflects. The activity wasn't the point. The way was the point. And once you understand this, you realize that discipline is not a ladder you climb. It's a skin you grow into. Modern life teaches the opposite. It tells us discipline is a tool to reach a goal, a fit body, a successful career, a bigger bank account. And once the goal is achieved, we can relax. But this mindset is why so many lose what they built. The person who disciplines himself only to lose weight will regain it, because the identity remains unchanged. The person who disciplines herself only to get through exams will stop learning once the diploma is in hand. Discipline built for outcomes dies with those outcomes. Discipline built as identity endures forever. Here's the shift. Stop saying, "I want to be disciplined." Start saying, "I am disciplined," not as a boast, but as a commitment to identity. Each small act you repeat, each workout, each page read, each moment of silence, each honest self-assessment is not just progress. It is a vote for the person you are becoming. Over time, those votes accumulate into identity, and identity always wins. Ask yourself, who do you want to be when no one is watching? Do you want to be the person who occasionally tries? Or do you want to be the person who simply is, who lives discipline as naturally as breathing? Musashi's life shows us that when you merge action with identity, discipline stops being fragile. It becomes unshakable because it is no longer something you do. It is who you are. This is the ultimate transformation. From Earth's brutal honesty to water's adaptability, from fire's fuel to wind's humility, and finally to the void's acceptance, all of it leads here, to the realization that the way is not outside you. It is within you. You are the way. And once this shift takes place, you no longer ask, "How do I stay disciplined?" Instead, you ask, "What does a disciplined person do right now?" And then you do it. That is the essence of Musashi's genius, not just to teach us techniques, but to reshape us into beings who no longer rely on fleeting motivation or fragile willpower, but on identity itself. Discipline becomes you. And when that happens, you are no longer pretending, no longer forcing, no longer struggling against yourself. You are simply living the way, and that is the power that makes you unstoppable. Discipline is often misunderstood. People treat it as punishment, as a burden, as something to endure until they reach an easier life. But Musashi's philosophy reveals the deeper truth. Discipline is not the bridge to somewhere else. It is the way itself. The struggle you feel every morning, the resistance you push through, the rituals you repeat when no one is watching, that is not the cost of greatness. That is greatness. Think back to the journey we've taken. The Earth Ring taught us brutal honesty, the courage to face ourselves without excuses. The Water Ring showed us how to adapt, to flow, to keep moving forward, even when perfection fails. The Fire Ring revealed the power of emotions, not as chains, but as fuel. The Wind Ring reminded us to stay humble, to remain students, never prisoners of arrogance. And finally, the Void Ring unveiled the eternal truth, that discipline has no end, and in that endlessness lies peace. These lessons are not just stories from a samurai's past. They are weapons for your present, tools you can wield right now in the ordinary moments of your life, when you pick up your phone instead of doing your work. That is a duel. When you push yourself for one more rep, one more page, one more minute, that is a victory. When you refuse to let comparison or pride corrupt you, you are walking Musashi's path. And here's the most liberating part. You don't need to wait to begin. You don't need the perfect plan, the perfect day, or the perfect mood. You need only to choose the way, right now, in this moment. To decide that discipline is not something you'll try, but something you'll become. Every choice is a blade. Every ritual is a strike. Every day is a battle. And each time you show up, you are carving yourself into someone unrecognizable. Someone so disciplined that people will call you crazy. But what they call madness is simply mastery. What they see as obsession is simply clarity. And what they can't understand is this, that the eternal struggle is not your curse. It is your freedom. So the question is no longer, when will this get easier? The question is, what battle will you fight today?